Take my hand, lead me home to righteousness and justice and peace. In 2004, on the 75th anniversary of the birth of the Martin Luther King Jr., Grace Lee Boggs, an elder stateswoman of the Black Power movement whose social change activity was nurtured and developed in the inner city of Detroit, reflected on what might have been different if we had taken King's most radical teachings to heart. She also reflects on what might be possible still, even these many years later. Ms. Boggs is clear that in the 1960s, she didn't pay much attention to Martin Luther King Jr. Identified more closely with Malcolm X, she, along with many others, viewed King's ideas of nonviolence and beloved community as somewhat naive and sentimental. In the decades after the assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Boggs continued to work nonstop in the struggle to free urban communities of crime and violence that escalated in the wake of the urban rebellions of the late 1960s and the deindustrialization of Detroit. In her 2004 reflection, she says, in the years since the MLK holiday was signed into law, we have drifted further and further from anything like a beloved community in this nation. She wonders if things might have taken a different path, if she and others in the Black Power movement and others around the country somehow had found a way to infuse the struggle for Black power with the nonviolent philosophy of Martin Luther King. If current relationships, both interracial as well as intra-racial relationships, would have been more harmonious, more constructive, if Malcolm's militancy and King's vision of beloved community had been blended into a single strategy. Might everyone have discovered a revolutionary power beyond their wildest dreams? Boggs ponders if, just possibly, this kind of power might be available to us even now. Reading and rereading King's speeches and writings from the last 2 years of his life, she came to believe King's prophetic vision for the beloved community is the indispensable starting point for genuine societal change in the 21st century. In Ms. Boggs' words, "These are the times that try our souls. I cannot recall any previous period when the challenges have been so basic, so interconnected, and so demanding, not just to specific groups, but to everyone living in this country regardless of race, ethnicity, class, gender, age, or national origin," unquote. What is this beloved community of which King spoke? During the Montgomery bus boycott under King's leadership, an African American community struggling against their own dehumanization by the dominant culture engaged in a year-long nonviolent and very disciplined boycott, a movement that ultimately was successful. King led and guided them in this movement not to be angry victims, not to be marauding rebels, even with a good cause, but to be men and women seeing themselves in a new way, a people demonstrating a new society, men and women acting in new ways, going toward a more human and a more humane society, a people forming a solid community, caring for one another while effectively standing against the injustices all around them. Using this approach, grounded on love and structural change, the people themselves were transformed by their active love and caring, by their courageous efforts to stand up to oppressive power. And this successful movement spawned more movements, movements resulting not only in the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, but also in creating movements that led to a more civil society in our country. As King's strategic thinking developed over the years, it became clear to him in the struggle for racial justice that the struggle for racial justice was linked to injustices of every kind and involving every skin color and every national and ethnic origin. Especially in the last 2 years of his life, King more fully grasped that the problems at hand required complex and far-reaching solutions, solutions challenging the very values and institutions of our society. He increasingly understood the struggle against racism was interlinked with the struggle against poverty and militarism and rampant materialism and consumerism. He knew on deeper and deeper levels the struggle was one of exposing and addressing injustices deeply embedded into the structures of our society. And the hope for humankind as King saw it lay in developing a person-oriented society, a beloved community where people are of paramount importance, where people are empowered for full participation in society, and where growth in the human soul keeps pace with technology and science, providing an ethical and moral grounding. King envisioned people at the grassroots and the community levels living in beloved community, building relationships and infrastructures on which to build a new society, expanding the understanding of truth, and creating new values. King called for programs which drew people into self-transforming and structure-transforming action, especially, as he said, in our dying cities. He called communities and nations to an overriding loyalty to the entire human family, embracing and preserving the best in every culture. Martin Luther King's revolutionary spirit, the transforming movement he empowered, was grounded on internalizing and sharing love, love which he understood as readiness to do whatever it takes to restore and maintain community, genuine and real, true community. Grace Lee Boggs came to believe, we live in a time when we are in great need of revitalizing King's revolutionary spirit by internalizing and sharing his concept of love as the readiness to do whatever it takes to restore genuine, true community in our time.